How do you feel the trial's going so far?
I'm not going to comment at this time, but it's good to see you, Dominic.
Well, as you saw, Dom caught up with Joe Percoco that outside the courtroom today in Lower Manhattan. The corruption trial is moving right along. Now, the jury, they're going to decide the fate of the former top Cuomo aide, and they were chosen in one day yesterday. Opening arguments, they actually began today. As always, Dominic Carter on the ground. He joins us there live. Dom, what happened today?
You know, Richard, I'm glad you made that point about how Judge Valerie Caproni pushed through selecting this jury. We were here literally last night. She didn't break court until 7 p.m. I have never been in court, especially federal court, that long. But Judge Caproni was not joking around. To your point, she was determined to select this jury. Now, we spoke to Mr. Percoco just a short time ago. Court ended within the hour. But inside the courtroom today, on this day, Richard, when it came to the opening statements, it went from one extreme to the other. In dramatic fashion, prosecutor Robert Boone walked up to Governor Cuomo's one-time confidant, Joseph Percoco, pointing at Percoco's face. He, Percoco, didn't need a title. Everyone knew he was Governor Cuomo's right-hand man. Prosecutor Boone told the jury Percoco had code words for bribe payments. Quote, keep the ZD flowing. Yes, that's the same term for cash from the Sopranos TV show. There was more from the prosecutor. Quote, why did he decide to corrupt the governor's office? Because of greed.
We are cautiously optimistic.
Percoco's attorney, Barry Bohr, said 3 times, this is a mistaken prosecution. The government's case is not worthy. Our defense is the truth, and the truth is Joe Percoco and his wife received money in good faith. Percoco is accused of accepting more than $300,000 in bribes through a newly created low-show job for his wife. The feds did not charge Lisa Percoco. But Bohr is already looking ahead, targeting the prosecution's key witness, lobbyist Todd Howe, who worked many years for Cuomo and has already pleaded guilty to numerous counts. He repeatedly called Howe a liar. The feds have a cooperating witness, Mr. Howe. Are you worried about that? Will that be devastating to your case?
We think that he will prove to be one of the more interesting witnesses to take the witness stand in this courthouse in a long time. And we do not think that his testimony is the kind of testimony on which a jury will rely.
The first witness today called by the prosecution, a forensic accountant with the FBI, who thoroughly examined the Percoco's finances and detailed the payments to Percoco's wife. So it turned out to be some day here at the courthouse, Richard. Let's go back to you in the studio.
All right, Dom, great job as always. Thank you. Now, even though someone close to Cuomo is facing federal corruption charges, Republicans, they're not banging the door down to run against him. Now, the only declared candidates are Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb and former Erie County Executive Joel Giambra. Now, State Senator John Flanagan, the Majority Leader, is said to be considering a run, but Rob Astorino, former Congressman Chris Gibson, businessman Harry Wilson, and a couple others have all said thanks but no thanks, I'm not running. Vinny, is it either the state of the field, if you will, or the bench of the GOP as to where we are right now, how unbeatable Cuomo appears at this point, or just the registration realities in New York?
I think all three. I think the bench is a reflection of the registration in the state. I mean, since 1994, Republican registration has been ticking down. Democratic registration has been ticking up. I think about 47% of the state is registered Democrat to about 24% Republican. Cuomo's re-election numbers look very good right now. His hard re-elect, his favorable, unfavorable, his job approval, ballot test. And as a Republican, looking at those numbers and then the financial component of this race, you really have to wonder if you want to put your family through that and yourself through
But can I make the argument, and you know this better than anybody, I mean, you worked with Pataki in his presidential bid, but nonetheless, there's a guy with no name recognition from Pleasantville, right? Right? Pleasantville? Peaksville, excuse me. Who went from nowhere to governor because the tides can turn in an election year. You have a trial that we just covered here, and there are some unknowns.
Right, there are some unknowns, and I think based on how this trial plays out, you might see more people getting into this race. But if you want to talk historically, back in '94, this wasn't really, the race wasn't about George Pataki, it was about Mario Cuomo. The state was in a much different shape.
Yep.
You don't have those indicators today.
Giancarlo, to me, I always thought the first time you run, in many cases, you're running for name recognition, so the second time you can't. Under any permutation, Andrew Cuomo is widely believed, unless he does the Hamlet on the Hudson like his old man, that he's gearing up for a run for 2020. So wouldn't now be the time to say, I'm going to plant the flag, I'm going to run here, probably more on the, if you can get, Mike Long from the conservative thing to go along, to get along, to at least be a moderate to run in New York, that you could have a chance in 4 years?
Here's how I would answer that question. I've worked in politics for many years in many states all over the country. I couldn't name one politician that strikes more fear into the heart of his opponents than Andrew Cuomo. For a variety of reasons. Well, I think that it's a mixture of vindictiveness. I think it's a mixture of
Bill de Blasio.
Well, of a lot of things. I mean, he got along with Chris Christie.
Yeah.
Two guys who weren't shy about wanting the spotlight, weren't shy about shivving their opponents, strong personalities. If those two could forge an alliance, I think that tells you something. And, Cuomo's got it. You raise a great point. If the guy's going to run for president, why not be the sacrificial lamb the first time, so to speak, to build your name recognition? But and Vinny alluded to this. It's a lot different now to be the sacrificial lamb than it was
Andrew,
in 1994.
I got to tell you, there are Republicans I've spoken to, moderate Republicans, even with some money, who within the first couple sentences, they say, the Conservative Party will never go long. I think the public doesn't realize how influential the Conservative Party is on the primary basis for Republicans, and you've got to get that blessing. And because of that, frankly, the Palladinos of the world here, or the Spencers or whatever, guys who never have a chance here, they get through the gauntlet here before guys who could really give a more credible challenging, they can't get through it.
Yeah, the Conservative Party has a long history of having an enormous impact on Republicans as they're going through for statewide races. I'm not sure how influential the Conservative Party is when it comes to fundraising, but Vinny touched on something earlier that there's a big financial disparity. I think Cuomo's got $30 million in the bank already. Now, you were talking about finding a candidate with deep pockets, but the state party is not in a great position to help finance a gubernatorial campaign either. So you'd be looking at somebody who has to make, in all likelihood, a substantial commitment of their own money just to get in this race. And then, oh, by the way, has to meet the conservative bona fides if they're going to get the support of the Conservative Party.
How am I overemphasizing the conservative influence? Because obviously we saw a Bloomberg, who many people said was a rhino, maybe fairly so, but nonetheless, you had a Republican mayor in New York City. Could some Wall Street guy say, hey, listen, I'll put up $50 million of my own money here, okay? We've seen it in plenty of other places in this country. Just get behind me, Conservative Party, and put me on the ballot here.
Could it happen? Sure. But the Conservative Party does play in the Republican primary. It's one of the reasons Joe Giambra is going to have a little bit of a problem, considering he supported Hillary Clinton. I think he would be a very attractive general election candidate, but you have to get through the primary. But yes, the Conservative Party, I think, could get along if the right candidate with the right money came along.
I mean, a moderate Republican could pull that off in New York City the same way that Michael Bloomberg did, but a moderate Republican probably doesn't coalesce Republicans around the state of New York, at least not where the Republican Party is, or at least the voting patterns of the Republican Party is in New York.
Cuomo either.
No,
He's
they don't.
right. They're scared of him if you're running against him, but if you go up to Buffalo, they're not doing cartwheels for the current governor.
Just look at what happened to Rob Astorino, who was a very good candidate, who was certainly funded to a capacity that would enable him to run. He had a lot going for him. The climate was favorable at the time, and Chris Christie took him out at the knee.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do everything right and still get whacked by a member of your own party when it comes to this guy. It's unbelievable.
Astorino is a great example because he had to govern in Westchester County further to the right of center than perhaps his heart of hearts would have led him to govern, and that cost him the election in 2017, or at least it was a contributing factor.
I forgot, though. He's right for people to forget. Christie, who was from the Republican Governors Association, literally
said,
when he was right across it, he has no chance of winning.
We don't invest in lost causes. I think that was the quote. I mean, geez, this wasn't some two-bit, Johnny come lately. This was a very
Christy,
strong
the gift
candidate.
that keeps on giving. All right. Coming up next, are we looking at a wave election in November as the Trump effect hurts Republicans? Or, hey, could the past week here maybe change that dynamic with the shutdown and who's getting the blame here? We'll take a look at the national picture and how Republicans in our area are dealing with it as they try to hold on to their jobs.